Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're taking a deep dive into some really profound insights about human consciousness, the nature of the ego, and maybe a path to a radically different way of being.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Our source material for this exploration is, well, it's a powerful work. It really challenges us to look within and fundamentally rethink how we perceive ourselves and the world around us.
It definitely does.
What if everything you thought about success, happiness, even your own mind, was fundamentally backwards? Today, we're diving into a radical perspective that might just turn your world inside out, hopefully, in the best possible way.
And what's fascinating here is how our sources, particularly A New Earth, they make this really bold claim right off the bat.
Which is?
That humanity's history isn't just, imperfect, but often reads like a clinical case of collective madness.
Wow. Madness, that's strong.
It is. But here's the surprising twist. Realizing this deep-seated dysfunction is actually presented as humanity's greatest achievement.
Really? How so?
Because it's seen as the key, the absolute key to a radical inner transformation. So our mission today is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, some surprising facts, too, that can help you understand what might be holding you back.
And how to break free.
Exactly. How you can tap into a deeper sense of self, a purpose that sort of transcends the noise of everyday life. This isn't just philosophy. It's framed as a practical roadmap to reclaiming your mind and ultimately your life.
Okay. So our deep dive begins with a rather candid, almost shocking assessment of the normal state of mind for most humans throughout history.
Yeah, it doesn't pull any punches.
It really paints a stark picture of where we've been and perhaps where many still unconsciously reside.
Yeah.
It's a challenging mirror to look into, but a necessary one, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely necessary. If we delve into humanity's ancient religions and spiritual traditions, we uncover this core insight that almost all of them, in their original unadulterated form, agree on. The realization that the normal state of mind for most human beings contains a strong element of what we might call dysfunction or even madness.
Madness again. So this isn't a new idea.
Not at all. This isn't a modern observation. Our sources cite Hindu teachings that refer to this dysfunction as Maya, the veil of delusion.
Right, Maya. I've heard that term.
And one of the greatest Indian sages, Ramana Maharshi, he put it even more bluntly. He just stated, the mind is Maya.
The mind is the delusion.
He saw the very structure of the mind, when it's operating without awareness, as the source of this illusion, this collective mental illness. And it presents such a profound paradox, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, on one hand, humans have created truly sublime works of music, literature, painting, architecture, and sculpture. Amazing things.
Absolutely. And science, technology.
Exactly. More recently, through science and technology, we've brought about radical changes in how we live, achieving things that would have seemed miraculous just a couple of centuries ago. I mean, think about electricity, flight, the internet shaping our daily lives.
True. The human mind is incredibly intelligent.
Undeniably intelligent, capable of incredible feats of creativity and problem solving. Yet, the sources emphasize that its very intelligence is tainted by madness.
Tainted by madness, so intelligence isn't enough.
Apparently not. This is why science and technology, while impressive, have often magnified the destructive impact of this underlying human dysfunction on the planet, on other life forms, and even on humanity itself. It's like intelligence serving a deeper, unseen pathology.
That's a strong claim. Can you elaborate on how this collective insanity was most clearly recognized in recent history? Because, like you said, the 20th century saw incredible progress, but also unprecedented destruction.
Precisely. The 20th century in particular is highlighted as a period where this collective insanity was most clearly recognized, and it seemed to be intensifying, accelerating at an alarming rate.
For example?
Well, consider the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Now, wars driven by fear, greed, and power were common throughout history, right? But by then, the highly intelligent human mind had invented not just the internal combustion engine, but also bombs, machine guns, submarines, flamethrowers, poison gas.
All tools of destruction.
The highly efficient tools. We had the technology to connect the world, to cure diseases, to build amazing things. Instead, millions perished for a few miles of mud in static trench warfare. The source powerfully states this was intelligence in the service of madness.
So it wasn't a lack of intelligence.
No, it was intelligence applied in a profoundly destructive, frankly insane way, and that was just the beginning. By the end of the century, the number of violent deaths at the hand of fellow humans would exceed 100 million.
100 million. It's staggering.
It is, and this wasn't only from wars between nations, but from mass exterminations and genocide. The murder of 20 million under Stalin, the horrors of the Holocaust, or the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia, where a quarter of the population was murdered.
Unthinkable horrors.
And the disturbing truth presented is, this madness has not abated into the 21st century. It's still visible in our daily news. Just, observe the conflicts, the ideological divides, the inability to find common ground.
It's still playing out.
And beyond human-on-human violence, there's another equally concerning aspect of this collective dysfunction.
Which is?
The unprecedented violence that humans are inflicting on other life forms and the planet itself.
The environmental crisis.
Yes. The widespread destruction of oxygen-producing forests, the ill treatment of animals in factory farms and various industries, the poisoning of our rivers, oceans, and air. It leads to profound ecological crises. This behavior, the source notes, is driven by greed, ignorant of their connectedness to the whole.
Ignorant of connectedness. That seems key.
It's an ignorance of the fundamental interconnectedness of all life, a failure to recognize that harming the whole ultimately harms ourselves. Ultimately, our sources sum up human history as largely a history of madness.
That's quite the summary.
It is. They suggest if humanity's history were viewed as the clinical case history of a single human being, the diagnosis would be chronic paranoid delusions, a pathological propensity to commit murder and acts of extreme violence and cruelty against his perceived enemies, his own unconsciousness projected outward, criminally insane, with a few brief lucid intervals.
Wow. Criminally insane. It's a stark, almost terrifying assessment of the human condition, suggesting that what we consider normal is actually a profound state of collective insanity.
It's a challenging perspective, for sure.
Okay, wow. That's a heavy assessment, to say the least.
Yeah.
So if that's the macro picture of human history, how does this madness show up in our everyday lives? Because it's easy to look at those grand historical events and think, that's them, not me. But the source suggests a much deeper, more personal connection to this collective dysfunction. How does it play out in our individual minds?
Precisely. And that's where it gets personal. The text explains that fear, greed, and the desire for power are not the dysfunction themselves.
There's some...
Exactly. They are created by the dysfunction, which is described as a deep-seated collective delusion that resides within the mind of each human being. This is crucial because it means that simply trying to eliminate fear or desire, as many traditional spiritual practices attempt, often fails.
Why?
Because they haven't gone to the root of the dysfunction. The real issue isn't the emotions or desires themselves. It's the underlying delusion, the misidentification with thought that creates them. It's like we're trying to trim the branches when the root is unhealthy.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this leads to a really important point about self-improvement. Trying to become a good or better human being sounds commendable, right? And it's certainly a noble aspiration.
Of course.
But our sources explain that it's an endeavor you cannot ultimately succeed in unless there is a shift in consciousness.
Why not? Is it trying to be good?
Because such attempts are often still part of the same dysfunction, a subtle form of egoic self-enhancement. It's the ego trying to improve itself, which is a bit like a computer virus trying to fix itself with its own flawed code.
Okay. I see.
Instead, the true path suggested is not about trying to be good, but by finding the goodness that is already within you and allowing that goodness to emerge.
Finding it, not creating it.
Exactly. And that, the source emphasizes, can only happen with a fundamental shift in consciousness, a move from identifying with the mind to identifying with something deeper, something prior to thought.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because from this rather sobering insight into collective madness, a second, incredibly hopeful truth arises: the possibility of radical transformation. So it's not all doom and gloom after all. There's a way out of this madness.
Not at all, and that's the profound relief the sources offer. The good news is the possibility of a radical transformation of human consciousness. This concept, it turns out, has been articulated across various wisdom traditions throughout history.
Like what?
Well, it's known as enlightenment in Hinduism and Buddhism, salvation in the teachings of Jesus, and the end of suffering, or liberation and awakening in Buddhism. Different words, same core idea.
And the key is recognizing the madness first.
That's what our sources assert. That the greatest achievement of humanity is not its works of art, science, or technology, but the recognition of its own dysfunction, its own madness. This self-recognition is the first vital step towards sanity, towards something new. It's a turning point that previous generations largely missed.
So who were the first to see this?
We learn that this recognition began in the distant past with a few rare individuals. Gautama Siddhartha, the Buddha, meaning the awakened one, who lived 2,600 years ago in India, was perhaps the first to see this with absolute clarity.
The Buddha.
And around the same time, Lao Tzu emerged in China, leaving his profound teachings in the Tao Te Ching. These early awakened teachers are described as humanity's early flowers, precursors, rare and precious beings.
But their messages didn't transform everyone.
Unfortunately, their messages were often misunderstood and greatly distorted by their followers over time, and consequently did not transform human behavior except for a small minority. The structures built around them sometimes obscured the original insight.
It sounds like for much of history, these profound truths were either misunderstood or confined within certain traditions. But this transformation isn't just happening within traditional religious structures anymore, is it? It seems like there's a broader awakening taking place now, outside the confines of established institutions.
Absolutely. That's a key point. The new spirituality, this transformation of consciousness, is arising to a large extent outside of the structures of the existing institutionalized religions.
Why outside?
Well, the sources make a clear distinction that is crucial for us to grasp. Having a belief system, just a set of thoughts regarded as absolute truth, does not make you spiritual.
Just believing isn't enough.
In fact, the source argues, the more you identify with your beliefs and make them your identity, the more cut off you are from the spiritual dimension within yourself. This identification with thought, this attachment to a specific mental form, often leads to claiming sole possession of truth, and historically has even justified violence against those who don't believe exactly as you do.
Right. Beliefs can become divisive.
Exactly. What we are witnessing now, according to the source, is an unprecedented influx of consciousness. It's a new wave, a new possibility for humanity. However, it's important to note this is accompanied by an entrenchment and intensification of the ego.
So more light and more shadow.
Kind of like that, yes. It's a dynamic interplay. As light comes in, the shadows become more visible and sometimes more pronounced. This new consciousness, critically, is not a new belief system, a new religion, spiritual ideology, or mythology.
So it's not another ism.
Precisely. It's not about adopting another set of concepts to believe in. Instead, it's about something much deeper. The transcendence of thought, the newfound ability of rising above thought.
Rising above thought. What does that feel like?
This leads to a truly profound realization for many. What a liberation to realize that the voice in my head is not who I am.
That little voice.
Yeah, it's not me. If the incessant, often judgmental, worrying voice isn't who you are, then the natural question arises, who am I then?
Yeah.
The answer offered is the one who sees that. The awareness that is prior to thought, the space in which the thought or the emotion or sense perception happens. This shift in identity from the incessant stream of thinking to the pure, silent awareness behind it is a fundamental aspect of this emerging consciousness. It's a fundamental reorientation of who you believe yourself to be.
That concept of the voice in the head is something many of us can relate to, often to our detriment. Our source shares a really striking anecdote about this, vividly illustrating the state of being completely lost in thought to the point of appearing, well, mad.
It does. It's a very powerful story. The author recounts this transformative experience he had on a train in London. He observed a woman in her early 30s who seemed quite insane.
What was she doing?
She was talking to herself incessantly, loudly and angrily, completely absorbed in her thoughts and seemingly unaware of her surroundings. Her monologue was filled with accusations and defenses, fueled by a sense of being wronged. It was described as raw emotion looking for more emotion. She was essentially having an internal argument out loud, locked in her own mental drama.
Just lost in it.
Completely. Later, the author, who at the time was a self-professed intellectual convinced that all answers lay in thinking, had this sudden realization in the men's room. He found himself thinking, I hope I don't end up like her, and was shocked to hear himself mumble it aloud.
Oh, wow.
Then a profound, almost shattering insight hit him. Oh my God, I'm already like her.
He saw himself in her.
He recognized that his own mind was as incessantly active as hers. The differences were only in degree. Her predominant emotion was anger. His was anxiety. She spoke aloud. He thought mostly in his head. But the core pattern was the same, being completely identified with and lost in the constant stream of thought. If she was mad, then everyone was mad, including myself.
That's a huge realization.
Right. It was a pivotal moment, showing him that thinking without awareness is the main dilemma of human existence. It's the silent, internal monologue, largely unnoticed, that keeps us trapped. This incident not only gave him a first glimpse of awareness, the awareness of his thinking, but also planted the first doubt as to the absolute validity of the human intellect when left unchecked.
Doubt in the intellect itself.
Yes, and this doubt was tragically confirmed a few months later when a freely respected professor he admired, someone who seemed to have all the answers and whose intellect he revered, committed suicide.
Oh, no.
This stark reality further underscored the limitations of intellect alone when it is not rooted in a deeper awareness, revealing the pervasive, often unnoticed, collective mental illness that forms the foundation of much human suffering. It's a sobering reminder that all the answers in the head aren't enough if there's no deep connection to being.
Okay, let's unpack this. So if our minds can be this engine of collective dysfunction, then what about the emotional baggage we carry? Our sources introduce a fascinating, if a bit unsettling, concept that ties deeply into this: the pain body. Imagine it as a kind of emotional ghost in your system.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah, an emotional ghost. The pain body is defined as a semi-autonomous energy form made of emotion that lives within most human beings.
Semi-autonomous, like it has its own life.
Almost. It's not just a memory or a metaphor. It's presented as a living, unseen energy field within you. It forms from the remnant of pain left behind by every strong negative emotion that is not fully faced and seen for what it is in the moment it arises.
So undealt with emotion.
Exactly. When children experience strong negative emotions, they often find them too overwhelming to cope with and tend to avoid feeling them directly, pushing them down. This early avoidance mechanism often persists into adulthood, allowing the emotion to live on unrecognized, manifesting indirectly as anxiety, anger, chronic sadness, or even physical illness. It's unexpressed, unacknowledged emotional energy. And it accumulates.
It accumulates. But the pain body isn't just individual. It also partakes of the pain suffered by countless humans throughout the history of humanity.
Collective pain. How does that work?
This includes the immense pain from continuous tribal warfare of enslavement, pillage, rape, torture, and other forms of violence. This immense collective suffering still lives in the collective psyche of humanity and is being added to on a daily basis, as we can observe in the news or in people's relationships.
Wow.
The source even suggests that the collective pain body is probably encoded within every human's DNA, meaning we might inherit predispositions to certain emotional patterns.
Inherited pain, so even babies.
It suggests that even newborns already carry an emotional pain body. Some babies cry almost incessantly for no apparent reason, seemingly carrying a heavy share of human pain or maybe absorbing it from their parents' negative emotions.
That's heavy.
It is. But what's fascinating and somewhat counterintuitive is that people with heavier pain bodies usually have a better chance to awaken spiritually than those with lighter ones. Really, more pain, more chance to awaken. Why?
Because their suffering often reaches a point where they cannot live with their unhappiness any longer, and their motivation to awaken becomes strong. Their very suffering becomes the catalyst for change. The suffering body of Christ, so prominent in collective consciousness, is presented as an archetypal image, representing both the pain and the possibility of transcendence that resides within each of us.
So the suffering itself can be the doorway. What's fascinating here is how this pain body, this collective burden, actually sustains itself. It's almost as if it has a will of its own, an insidious intelligence seeking its own survival, like a parasitic entity feeding off our discomfort.
It does. That's a very apt description. The pain body has its own primitive intelligence, much like a cunning animal, and its primary goal is survival.
Survival. How does an emotion survive?
It periodically needs to feed to take in new energy. The food it requires is energy that is compatible with its own, meaning energy that vibrates at a similar frequency. Any emotionally painful experience serves as its nourishment.
So it feeds on pain.
Yes. That's why it thrives on negative thinking as well as drama in relationships. The sources label the pain body as an addiction to unhappiness.
An addiction to unhappiness. That's hard to accept.
It can be a shocking realization for many. There is something within you that periodically seeks emotional negativity, seeks unhappiness. When the pain body takes you over, you not only don't want the unhappiness to end, but you may even want to make others just as miserable as you are in order to feed on their negative emotional reactions. It's a very uncomfortable truth that a part of us might be addicted to conflict or self-pity.
Okay, how does this feeding process work?
The pain body typically has dormant and active stages. It awakens from its dormancy when it gets hungry or when it's triggered by an event. Even an insignificant event, something someone says or does, or even just a thought, can be enough to activate it.
So it can just pop up.
If you're alone, the pain body will feed on your thoughts, suddenly making your thinking deeply negative. You might not even realize that a dark and heavy mood, anxiety, or anger preceded this negative thought influx. The key is that it can only feed on negative thoughts because only those thoughts are compatible with its own energy field.
Only negative thoughts work as food.
Exactly. Happy, positive thoughts are indigestible to the pain body because they vibrate at a different, higher frequency. It's like trying to feed a vampire sunlight. It just can't process it.
That idea of our minds feeding negativity reminds me of a powerful analogy in our sources about a duck. It perfectly encapsulates how humans hold on to emotional baggage compared to the effortless way the animal kingdom seems to shed it. It's quite an eye-opener.
It's a brilliant observation, isn't it? And a profound lesson in simplicity. The source describes how after two ducks get into a fight, which, importantly, never lasts long, they separate. Each duck then flaps its wings vigorously a few times, effectively releasing the surplus energy that built up during the fight. After this release, they float on peacefully, as if nothing had ever happened.
They just let it go. Instantly.
Entirely in the present moment, free of lingering resentment or analysis. Now contrast this with a human mind. If the duck had a human mind, it would keep that fight alive indefinitely through thinking by story making.
Making stories. We do that.
Constantly. The duck's imagined internal monologue might sound something like this. I don't believe what he just did. He came to within 5 inches of me. He thinks he owns this pawn. He has no consideration for my private space. I'll never trust him again.
Oh, I recognize that kind of thinking.
Next time he'll try something else just to annoy me. I'm sure he's plotting something already, but I'm not going to stand for this. I'll teach him a lesson he won't forget. And this mental spinning could go on, days, months, or years later. It's astonishing how we replay, analyze, and re-traumatize ourselves.
So the mind keeps it alive.
The profound insight here is that as far as the body is concerned, the fight is still continuing. The energy generated in response to these continuous negative thoughts is emotion, which in turn generates more thinking, creating the emotional thinking of the ego.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly. This illustrates how problematic the duck's life would become if it had a human mind. Yet, this is how most humans live all the time. The core insight. Your mind keeps the fight alive, not your body. The simple lesson from the duck is to flap your wings, which translates as let go of the story and return to the only place of power, the present moment.
Let go of the story. Easier said than done sometimes.
True. But the awareness is the first step. No situation is truly finished in the human mind as long as the ego's story keeps it going. And frankly, the next time my partner leaves socks on the floor, I should probably check if my pain body is just looking for a snack. It's astonishing how easily we can fall into this pattern.
It's astonishing how animals shed negativity so effortlessly. But for us, it seems we collect it. And speaking of holding on to the past, there's another Zen story that beautifully illustrates this burden, reinforcing the idea of letting go of that unnecessary emotional baggage.
Ah, yes, the story of the two Zen monks, Tanzin and Aikido. It's a classic for a reason.
Remind us how it goes.
They were walking on a very muddy road after heavy rains. They came upon a young woman who couldn't cross a particularly deep puddle without ruining her precious silk kimono. Immediately, without a moment's hesitation, Tanzan picked her up and carried her to the other side.
Okay, seems helpful.
The monks then walked on in complete silence for 5 hours. Finally, as they neared their lodging temple, Aikido couldn't hold his resentment any longer. He burst out, almost accusingly, "Why did you carry that girl across the road? We monks are not supposed to do things like that. We have vows."
He'd been stewing on it for hours.
5 hours. Tanzan's reply is the punchline, a moment of deep, cutting wisdom. "I put the girl down hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" It really is. This story powerfully conveys how most people carry a large amount of unnecessary baggage, both mental and emotional, throughout their lives. They limit themselves through grievances, regret, hostility, guilt, the emotional residues of past events.
The story again?
Their emotional thinking has become their self, causing them to hang on to the old emotion because it strengthens their identity. The ego, you see, loves a good story, especially one where it's the victim or the one who was wronged.
So we identify with the baggage.
We do. The profound takeaway is this. Nothing ever happened in the past that can prevent you from being present now. And if the past cannot prevent you from being present now, what power does it have? It challenges us to recognize that the past's only power is what we give it by continuously reliving it, nourishing it, and identifying with it in our minds. The girl was put down, the fight with the duck was over, but in the human mind, the story keeps going.
So, if the pain body loves drama and feeds on this kind of emotional baggage, how does it manifest not just in our individual minds, but in our closest relationships, and even on a societal scale? It sounds like it can turn even seemingly loving connections into sources of profound conflict.
It absolutely does. The sources explain that if there are other people around, preferably your partner or a close family member, the pain body will attempt to provoke them, push their buttons, as the expression goes, so it can feed on the ensuing drama.
Pushing buttons. We all know that one.
It instinctively knows your weakest, most vulnerable points and is relentless, trying again and again if it doesn't succeed initially. It is raw emotion looking for more emotion, seeking to awaken the other person's pain body so both pain bodies can mutually energize each other.
So they feed off each other.
It's an unconscious dance of suffering, each person feeding the other's pain. This dynamic can be so strong that some couples who may think they have fallen in love are actually feeling drawn to each other because their respective pain bodies complement each other.
Drawn together by pain.
Sometimes, yes. The roles of perpetrator and victim are already clearly prescribed even when they first meet. As the source grimly notes, some marriages that are thought to be made in heaven are actually made in hell, fueled by the mutual unconscious need for emotional drama.
Made in hell. That's quite a statement.
And excessive alcohol consumption is also mentioned as a major activator of the pain body, particularly in men. When a person becomes drunk, they often undergo a complete personality change as the pain body takes them over.
The drunken personality.
Exactly. If they're prone to violence, they may direct it at their spouse or children. The promises of remorse when sober come from a different entity than the one who committed the violence, making it highly likely to reoccur unless the individual achieves presence and disidentifies from the pain body. The sober self and the pain body self are described as fundamentally different states of consciousness.
That's a powerful and disturbing insight into how deeply this pain body can infiltrate our personal relationships. But this extends even further, doesn't it? How does entertainment and media feed into this pain body on a wider cultural level? What part of us, exactly, loves to feel bad?
It's a pervasive issue, and it reveals a deep societal addiction, according to the source. The sources question why millions of people love and pay money to watch humans kill and inflict pain on each other and call it entertainment.
Good question. Why do we?
They conclude that people obviously watch those films because they want to feel bad. What part of us loves to feel bad and calls it good?
The pain body.
The pain body, of course. A significant portion of the entertainment industry caters directly to this, allowing the pain body to renew itself vicariously through the cinema and television screen. It's presented as a cyclical process. Pain bodies write and produce these films, and pain bodies pay to watch them. It's a supply and demand for unhappiness.
But not all films are like that, surely.
No, and the sources distinguish this. If films portray violence in its wider context, showing its origin and consequences and the collective unconsciousness that lies behind it, then those films can fulfill a vital function in the awakening of humanity.
How so?
They can act as a mirror in which humanity sees its own insanity, and the part of you which recognizes madness as madness, even if it is your own, is sanity, is the arising awareness, is the end of insanity.
Seeing the madness is sanity.
Exactly. But many films simply glorify violence for the sole purpose of generating negative emotion in the viewer, becoming a fix for the pain-addicted pain body. The tabloid press is another glaring example, primarily selling negative emotion rather than news.
Outrage sells.
Pretty much. Headlines like, "Outrage screams the 3-inch headline," or "Bastards," demonstrate their keen understanding that negative emotion sells far more papers. The news media in general tends to thrive on negative news, with presenters often becoming excited by escalating negativity, fueling this addiction to unhappiness within the collective pain body. It's an industry built, in part, on keeping the pain body fed.
And what about the collective pain body in specific groups like genders or nations? How does that layer of shared history and suffering manifest, creating deeper ingrained patterns?
Right. The collective pain body indeed has different strands, varying in density and specific manifestation. Tribes, nations, races all have their own collective pain body, stemming from their shared historical experiences.
Like a national trauma.
Exactly. For instance, almost every woman has her share in the collective female pain body, which often activates intensely around menstruation. This collective female pain body is linked to the historical suppression of the feminine.
Suppression of the feminine.
Our sources cite the horrific period of the Holy Inquisition, where 3 to 5 million women were tortured and killed, effectively declaring the sacred feminine demonic. Other cultures and religions also suppress the female dimension, reducing women's status. The text attributes this to the evolving ego in men, which felt threatened by the feminine and had to render the female powerless to gain control of the planet. It's described as an egoic, out-of-balance world that sought to dominate rather than harmonize with the feminine principle.
A historical wound carried collectively.
Yes. And similarly, national and racial pain bodies exist. Countries with histories of widespread violence, like those in the Middle East, can have such acute collective pain bodies that populations are described as being forced to act it out in an endless and insane cycle of perpetration and retribution.
An unconscious reenactment.
It's presented that way. Nations like Germany and Japan are mentioned as having historically tried to desensitize themselves through intense work ethic, almost as a way of burying the pain. Interestingly, China's heavy pain body is suggested to be somewhat mitigated by the widespread practice of Tai Chi, which stills the mind and generates presence, offering a counterbalance.
And racial pain bodies.
The collective racial pain body is highlighted as especially pronounced in Jewish people due to centuries of persecution, and also in Native Americans and Black Americans whose ancestors endured genocide, enslavement, and brutality.
The weight of history.
Yes. What's crucial to understand, and this is a central tenet of the source, is that it is always the case that both victim and perpetrator suffer the consequences of any acts of violence, oppression, or brutality. For what you do to others, you do to yourself. The unconscious mind of the perpetrator is also deeply wounded by the acts it commits.
So everyone suffers. Is there a way out of these cycles?
Ultimately, the source offers a powerful solution, or rather a shift in perspective. There is only one perpetrator of evil on the planet: human unconsciousness.
Unconsciousness itself is the perpetrator.
Yes. This realization is presented as true forgiveness. When you understand that the actions stem from a collective mind sickness, not a personal identity that is inherently evil, your victim identity dissolves and your true power emerges, the power of presence. Instead of blaming the darkness, you bring in the light of awareness, shifting the focus from external blame to internal transformation.
So if this ego and pain body are so pervasive, almost dictating so much of our individual and collective experience, how on earth do we genuinely break free? It feels like an enormous, almost insurmountable task. Where do we even begin?
It may seem so, but the approach, once you grasp it, is surprisingly simple. Not necessarily easy, but simple. The sources explain that the beginning of freedom from the pain body lies, first of all, in the realization that you have a pain body.
Just acknowledging it exists.
No, that's the essential initial step. You can't address what you don't acknowledge. Then more important is your ability to stay present enough, alert enough, to notice the pain body in yourself as a heavy influx of negative emotion when it becomes active.
Noticing it as it happens.
Yes. It's about becoming the observer rather than being swept away by it. The key insight is this: when it is recognized, it can no longer pretend to be you and live and renew itself through you.
It loses its disguise.
Exactly. It's like shining a powerful spotlight on something hidden in the dark. It loses its power to operate unconsciously, to manipulate you. It is your conscious presence that breaks the identification with the pain body.
Presence breaks identification.
When you no longer identify with it, when you simply observe it without judgment or feeding it with thought, the pain body can no longer control your thinking and so cannot renew itself anymore by feeding on your thoughts.
Starving it of thought food.
Precisely. Now, it may not dissolve immediately, but the pain body begins to lose energy. Your thinking becomes clear. Your present perceptions are no longer distorted by the past. The energy that was trapped in the pain body then changes into vibrational frequency and is transmuted into presence.
Transmuted, like alchemy.
In a way, yes. The pain body becomes fuel for consciousness, which is why many of the wisest, most enlightened men and women on our planet once had a heavy pain body. Their suffering became their catalyst for awakening, propelling them to seek a way out.
This sounds almost miraculous, and our sources offer a real-life example of this happening, illustrating how simply being present and aware can disarm intense pain and suffering almost instantly. It's a powerful testament to the liberating power of consciousness.
Yes, the story of Ethel is a perfect illustration of this principle in action.
Tell us about Ethel.
The author was counseling her, and she arrived one day in a state of great distress and anger. Her diamond ring was missing, and she was convinced her caretaker had stolen it, expressing intense indignation and a frantic need to confront the woman or call the police.
Understandable distress, perhaps.
On the surface, yes. But the author quickly sensed that her profound pain wasn't caused just by the present circumstances, but by an extraordinarily heavy pain body that had been activated. She was feeding it with her thoughts, completely identified with her unhappy story of being wronged.
So the pain body took over the story.
Exactly. Now, the author's response was crucial and quite counterintuitive to conventional therapy. He remained open, alert, intensely present with every cell of the body. He listened in stillness without any mental commentary, refusing to react, refusing to confirm the reality of her story, refusing to feed her mind with more thought and her pain body with more emotion.
He just held the space.
He simply allowed her to experience whatever she was experiencing at that moment without making it real or personal for himself. After about 10 minutes of her torrent of words, a profound, almost stunning shift occurred.
What happened?
Ethel suddenly stopped talking, looked at the papers scattered around her as if she had just woken up from a dream. She became completely calm and gentle. Her entire energy field changed. She then looked at the author and said, with genuine surprise, "This isn't important at all, is it?"
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. The next morning, she called him, still amazed, and asked, "What did you do to me? Last night was the first night in years that I slept well. In fact, I slept like a baby."
And what did he say?
The author clarified. He had done nothing to her, but rather he had not reacted, not fed her mind with more thought and her pain body with more emotion. He had simply allowed her to experience whatever she was experiencing, and through his presence offered a space for her own awareness to emerge.
So his presence allowed her presence to arise.
That's the idea. The profound insight from this encounter is that emotion in itself is not unhappiness. Only emotion plus an unhappy story is unhappiness. This moment of non-identification, brought about by conscious presence, was the beginning of the end of her pain body. It demonstrated that the mere presence of alert, conscious awareness can dissolve deep-seated suffering that has been sustained by identification with thought.
This principle of acceptance, of simply allowing what is, isn't just for emotional pain, is it? The sources talk about limit situations, where profound loss, tragedy, disaster can surprisingly lead to an awakening, a deeper peace that defies all logic.
Exactly. The sources describe these limit situations where people experience tragic loss, losing all their possessions, children, spouse, social position, reputation, or physical abilities, sometimes all at once due to disaster or war.
The absolute worst things imaginable.
Yes. In these moments, whatever they had identified with, whatever gave them their sense of self, had been taken away. Everything that defined them in the external world was stripped away. Surprisingly for some, the initial anguish or fear gives way to a sacred sense of presence, a deep peace and serenity and complete freedom from fear.
Peace amidst devastation.
How? This phenomenon was known to St. Paul, who spoke of the peace of God which passeth all understanding. It's a peace that doesn't make logical sense in the face of such devastation, yet it arises from a deeper dimension of being when external forms are shattered.
When there's nothing left to cling to.
Perhaps. This contrasts sharply with others who, when faced with similar loss, immediately create a strong mental image or thought form in which they see themselves as a victim. They then strongly identify with this new victim identity and the emotions it generates: anger, resentment, self-pity, allowing the ego to quickly find a new form, even if it's deeply unhappy.
So the ego finds a new identity in victimhood.
The ego, ever resourceful, will latch onto a new identity, even one of suffering. The key distinction lies in how one responds. Whenever tragic loss occurs, you either resist or you yield.
Resist or yield.
Resistance is described as an inner contraction, a hardening of the shell of the ego, which closes you off from life. And whatever you fight, you strengthen, and what you resist persists.
What you resist persists. Heard that before.
If you yield, however, it means inner acceptance of what is. You are open to life, not fighting reality. This surrender allows a new dimension of consciousness to open up. If action is needed, it will then be in alignment with the whole and supported by creative intelligence. If no action is possible, you simply rest in the peace and inner stillness that come with surrender. This is presented as a profound choice in the face of life's most difficult moments.
So what does this all mean about our relationship with the present moment? Because that seems to be where everything hinges for this transformation, the crucible where this inner alchemy takes place.
Yes, it's absolutely fundamental. The sources state unequivocally that the most important, the primordial relationship in your life is your relationship with the now, or with whatever form the present moment takes.
More important than relationships with people.
Primordial, they call it. Because the ego, in fact, could be defined simply in this way, a dysfunctional relationship with the present moment. The moment you reach a certain level of consciousness, you can consciously choose what kind of relationship you want to have with the now.
The choice.
Do I want the present moment to be my friend or my enemy? Since the present moment is inseparable from life, this is essentially asking what kind of relationship you want with life itself. When you choose to make the present moment your friend, by welcoming it, life becomes friendly toward you, people become helpful, circumstances cooperative.
And the ego's relationship, always dysfunctional.
By its very nature, the ego cannot be in alignment with the present moment because its structure compels it to ignore, resist, or devalue the now. Time is what the ego lives on.
It lives in past and future.
Exactly. The stronger the ego, the more time takes over your life, with thoughts constantly preoccupied with past or future, and identity rooted in the past for identity, and the future for fulfillment. This leads to fear, anxiety, expectation, regret, guilt, and anger, the dysfunctions of the time-bound state of consciousness.
So how does the ego treat the queen? Now specifically.
The sources detail 3 primary ways the ego treats the present moment, all of them dysfunctional. First, as a means to an end. The present is only useful for getting elsewhere, to some future moment that is considered more important, even though the future only ever arrives as the present moment. You're never fully here because you are always busy trying to get elsewhere, always chasing a future that never truly arrives as you envision it.
The arrival fallacy.
Second, as an obstacle. This is more pronounced. With the present moment, regarded and treated as if it were an obstacle to be overcome. This is the origin of impatience, frustration, and stress, where life, which is now, is seen as a problem. As long as the present moment is an obstacle, there can be no end to problems. Every solved problem simply gives way to another because the underlying relationship with the now is one of resistance.
Always fighting the current moment.
And third, as an enemy. This is the most extreme, where you hate what you're doing, complain about your surroundings, curse things that are happening, or argue with what is. You are making life into an enemy, and life says war is what you want and war is what you get. Your external reality then reflects this inner hostility.
Wow. So what's the antidote?
A vital question to ask yourself frequently throughout your day is, what is my relationship with the present moment? The moment you recognize the dysfunction in how you relate to the now, it begins to dissolve. This seeing is the arising presence, giving you the choice to say yes to the now and make it your friend. It's truly as simple and as profound as that.
There's profound wisdom in not minding what happens, which seems to be at the heart of this acceptance and detachment. It's a radical idea for many of us who are so used to constantly judging and reacting. It feels almost counterintuitive to our programming.
Indeed. J. Krishnamurti, a renowned spiritual teacher, once revealed his secret. I don't mind what happens.
I don't mind what happens. Simple, but huge.
This simple statement carries profound implications. It implies an inner alignment with what happens, a relationship of inner non-resistance with what happens. It means not to label it mentally as good or bad, but to let it be. This doesn't mean inaction. On the contrary, when actions are based on this inner alignment, they become empowered by the intelligence of life itself. You act from a place of clarity and presence, rather than reactive resistance.
Like flowing with the river instead of fighting it.
Exactly. And the Zen master Hakuin provides another powerful illustration with his "Is That So?" story.
Ah, yes, tell that one.
A beautiful girl in his village became pregnant. Her angry parents, upon demanding to know who the father was, were told it was Hakuin. His only response was, "Is that so?" He took care of the baby, and his reputation was shattered. Later, the girl confessed the true father. When her parents returned, apologizing profusely, Hakuin's only response, again, was, "Is that so?"
Unflappable.
Utterly unperturbed, whether by falsehood and truth, bad news and good news. This signifies that he allows the form of the moment, good or bad, to be as it is, and so does not become a participant in human drama. To him, there is only this moment, and this moment is as it is. Events are not personalized. He is nobody's victim.
Not taking it personally.
His complete oneness with what happens means what happens have no power over him anymore. The lesson is clear. Only if you resist what happens are you at the mercy of what happens.
Resistance creates the suffering.
This non-resistance, non-judgment, and non-attachment are presented as the three aspects of true freedom and enlightened living. The paradoxical result is that when you are detached, you gain a higher vantage point. You can enjoy the pleasures of the world while they last without fear of loss or anxiety about the future.
Enjoyment without attachment.
Yes. The famous phrase, "this too will pass," from the King's Ring, serves as a powerful pointer to the impermanence of all forms, whether good or bad, leading to non-attachment and the emergence of inner space. When we stop giving things absolute importance, we free ourselves from self-created suffering, which stems from an overvaluation of form and an unawareness of the dimension of inner space. It's about not taking things personally, not letting external events define your inner state.
So how do we practically cultivate this presence in inner space to become the experiencer rather than being lost in that relentless thought stream? What are the actual tangible tools we can use daily to step back and find that deeper awareness?
Right, the practical side. The sources offer several highly effective, accessible tools for anyone to begin cultivating presence. First, breath awareness. Simple yet powerful. Being aware of your breathing takes attention away from thinking and creates space in your mind.
Just focusing on the breath.
Yes. Even one conscious breath is enough to make some space where before there was the uninterrupted succession of one thought after another. The breath is called an excellent meditation object precisely because it is not an object, has no shape or form.
Breath as formless awareness.
It's so subtle and formless that breath has no form as such. It has since ancient times been equated with spirit. By focusing on the breath, you automatically anchor yourself in the present moment, bypassing the mental noise and generating consciousness.
Okay, breath awareness. What else?
Second, closely linked, is inner body awareness. As you feel the subtle flow of air, you can also become aware of the inner body, the felt aliveness within you, diffused throughout the body.
Feeling the energy inside.
Yes, it's not about the physical form exactly, but the subtle energy field that animates your body. This practice anchors you in the present moment, and is described as a doorway out of the prison that is the ego. When you're in touch with the inner body, you're not identified with your body anymore, nor are you identified with your mind. You are moving away from form identification toward formlessness, which we may also call being.
Another doorway out of the ego.
And third, and perhaps most profound, is stillness. The sources beautifully state, stillness is the language God speaks, and everything else is a bad translation.
Stillness speaks.
To be conscious of stillness, whether in nature or between sounds, means to be still yourself. To be still is to be conscious without thought. The sources assert that you are never more essentially, more deeply yourself than when you were still.
Our true self is stillness.
Stillness connects you to who you were before you temporarily assumed this physical and mental form called a person, and who you will be when the form dissolves. It is consciousness, unconditioned, formless, eternal.
And the experiencer. Who is that?
Regarding who is the experiencer, the one witnessing the thoughts, the breath, the stillness, the answer given is, you are, and who are you? Consciousness.
I am consciousness.
Consciousness, also known as spirit or being, cannot be known in the normal sense because it has no form or object to be grasped. Instead, it is the luminous space in which the world arises and subsides. That space is the life that I am. It is timeless. I am timeless, eternal.
Okay. Steep.
The greatest impediment to discovering this inner space and finding the experiencer is to become so enthralled by the experience that you lose yourself in it. This means consciousness gets lost in its own dream, identified with every thought and emotion, a state that has been the normal state of humanity for thousands of years. But by sensing your own presence, the underlying I am, you reclaim that essential awareness, stepping out of the dream and into the awakened reality.
This concept of losing yourself to find yourself seems key here, especially when we consider how much of our identity, our sense of who I am, is tied to external forms, roles, achievements, and even opinions. It implies letting go of something we cling to very tightly.
It's absolutely central to the path described. Inner space, that deeper dimension of consciousness, also arises whenever you let go of the need to emphasize your form identity.
What's form identity?
This need is of the ego. It's not a true need for survival, but a compulsive drive to define ourselves through external roles, like being a good parent, a successful professional, a knowledgeable expert, or through possessions, or even through our beliefs and opinions. We derive our entire sense of self from these external forms.
Our roles, our stuff, our ideas.
Exactly. To the ego, this letting go will seem as if you were losing yourself. as if your very existence is threatened. But the sources clarify that the opposite is the case. As Jesus taught, you need to lose yourself to find yourself.
Lose the false self to find the true.
Whenever you relinquish these egoic behavior patterns like needing to stand out, needing to be special, needing to prove yourself right, or needing to demand attention, inner space emerges. You become more truly yourself. The paradox is that you become less so you can be more. You shed the confined, limited identity of the ego to reveal the expansive, unlimited being.
Less ego, more being.
By de-emphasizing who you are on the level of form, by relaxing that grip on your external identity, you generate consciousness. The profound outcome suggested is to discover the enormous power that flows through you into the world when you stop emphasizing your form identity. This power comes from recognizing that your true essence is beyond any temporary physical or psychological form. It's a liberation from the ego's constant, exhausting struggle to maintain a precarious, fragile sense of self. It's about realizing your true power lies not in what you are, but in that you are.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we begin to shift our consciousness in this profound way, to live more from presence, what does that mean for our actions and our larger purpose in the world? Does it change everything we do or just how we do it? And how does it redefine something as fundamental as success?
It profoundly changes both, but primarily how you do what you do. The sources introduce the concept of inner purpose for life.
Inner purpose, what is it?
This inner purpose is not what you do, but what you are. That is to say, your state of consciousness. This inner purpose cannot be found on the outer level, meaning it's not about achieving external goals as the ultimate aim of your existence.
So it's not about goals.
Not in the egoic sense. The ego's goals, control, power, attention, or simply more of anything, are always driven by a fundamental sense of lack, a feeling that something is missing. The underlying emotion that governs all the activity of the ego is fear. The fear of being nobody, the fear of non-existence, the fear of death.
Fear drives the ego's goals.
This fear constantly drives a bottomless, insatiable need for external things to fill a void that can never be filled externally. True success and happiness, however, are not found in these external things. The joy of being emanates from the formless dimension within you, from consciousness itself, and thus is one with who you are. This joy is your natural state, not something you acquire from the outside.
This leads us to the idea of awakened doing, which sounds truly transformative. It's not just about what we're doing in the world, but the energy and state of consciousness we bring to it.
Exactly. Awakened doing is defined as the outer aspect of the next stage in the evolution of consciousness. It's the alignment of your outer purpose, what you do with your inner purpose awakening and staying awake.
Aligning outer and inner purpose.
Yes. The sources emphasize that not what you do, but how you do what you do determines whether you are fulfilling your destiny. And how you do what you do is determined by your state of consciousness. This means that consciousness flows through you into your thoughts and actions, inspiring and guiding them, making every action a path to greater awareness.
So how does this awakened doing actually look?
The sources identify 3 modalities of awakened doing, which are practical ways to embody this new consciousness in everyday activities. First is acceptance. This is that inner alignment with what is. If you find yourself unable to enjoy or accept what you are doing, the instruction is clear. Stop.
Just stop.
Otherwise, you're not taking responsibility for your state of consciousness, which is the only thing you truly can take responsibility for. If you can't change it and you can't accept it, then the suggestion is to cease the activity.
Okay. Acceptance or stopping. What's next?
Second is enjoyment. This is described as the dynamic aspect of being, or joy is the dynamic aspect of being. When you make the present moment your focal point, your ability to enjoy what you do increases dramatically. Joy does not come from what you do, it flows into what you do, and thus into this world from deep within you.
Joy flows into the action. How do we cultivate that?
A practical spiritual practice offered is to make routine, seemingly mundane activities like commuting, grocery shopping, or laundry a vehicle for alertness. Be absolutely present in what you do and sense the alert, a live stillness within you in the background of the activity. You'll find that what you enjoy isn't the outward action itself, but the inner dimension of consciousness that flows into the action.
Finding joy in the mundane through presence. Makes sense. And the third?
The third is enthusiasm. This is deep enjoyment combined with a goal or vision that you're working towards. The word enthusiasm comes from the ancient Greek en and theos, meaning God or to be possessed by a god.
Enthusiasm as divine energy.
It's presented as a powerful, inspired energy. Unlike stress, which arises from wanting to arrive at your goal more than you want to be doing what you're doing, enthusiasm has a high energy frequency and so resonates with the creative power of the universe. It's non-confrontational, inclusive, and gives out of its own abundance, not from a place of lack.
So it's energized but not stressed?
Exactly. The sources state unequivocally, enthusiasm and the ego cannot coexist. When enthusiasm is present, you don't feel the need to do it all yourself. You ride the wave of creative energy knowing that there is nothing of significance that you can do by yourself when it comes to truly impactful endeavors.
Acceptance, enjoyment, enthusiasm, the modalities of awakened doing. This sounds like a pathway to a richer, more meaningful life, moving beyond the usual definitions of success that often leave us feeling unfulfilled, even after achieving them. It completely reframes what it means to be successful.
Precisely. The conventional notion of success, as the world defines it, is concerned with the outcome. Winning, recognition, accumulating wealth, or achieving specific goals. It's often based on hard work and luck or determination and talent. But the sources challenge this, stating, what the world doesn't tell you is that you cannot become successful. You can only be successful.
You can only be successful, not become it. Explain that.
True success, according to the source, is a successful present moment. This means there is a sense of quality in what you do, even the most simple action. Quality implies care and attention, which comes with awareness. Quality requires your presence. It's about bringing your full conscious attention to whatever you're doing right now.
Success is the quality of this moment's action.
Yes. Consider the example given of a business person who, after 2 years of intense stress and strain, finally achieves massive financial success. Conventionally, this is the epitome of success.
We would say so.
But in reality, as a source points out, they've spent 2 years polluting your body as well as the earth with negative energy, made yourself and those around you miserable, and affected many others you never even met. The underlying unconscious assumption is that success is a future event and that the need justifies the means.
The end justifies the means.
However, the sources firmly state that the end and the means are one. If the means, the actions taken, the state of consciousness you held while doing them, did not contribute to human happiness and well-being, then neither will the end result. This is described as karmic action, the unconscious perpetuation of unhappiness. The implication is clear. The quality of your present moment, the state of your consciousness as you engage in any activity, is the true measure of success. The journey is the destination.
The means are the end. That changes everything. And what about the larger vision, this concept of a new earth? How does it tie into all of this personal transformation and conscious action? It sounds like a grand culmination, a global shift that reflects these individual changes.
It is indeed presented as the larger context. The inspiration for the title, A New Earth, comes from a biblical prophecy of a new heaven and a new earth.
How is that interpreted here?
The sources interpret heaven not as a physical location, but as the inner realm of consciousness, and earth as the outer manifestation and form, which is always a reflection of the inner. Therefore, a new heaven is the emergence of a transformed state of human consciousness, and a new earth is its reflection in the physical realm.
So, change consciousness, change the world.
That's the fundamental principle. This highlights the intrinsic, undeniable connection between collective human consciousness and the life of our planet. As the old egoic consciousness dissolves, there may even be synchronistic, geographic, and climatic natural upheavals, some of which we might argue we are already witnessing. It's seen as an energetic recalibration.
Can you give an example of this transformation?
This transformation is beautifully exemplified by figures like Stephen Hawking. Despite suffering from a debilitating condition that stripped him of almost all physical capacity, his surrender to his physical limitation, rather than resisting it, led to a profound opening into spirit. As the source recounts, in commenting upon his life, Hawking said, "Who could have wished for more?"
Finding fulfillment beyond limitation.
Exactly. It demonstrates how going beyond limitation, through inner acceptance, can lead to a profound state of being, a fulfillment far beyond what external circumstances might suggest.
So how does this new earth actually emerge? Who brings it about?
The emergence of this new earth relies on frequency holders, those who are more inward-looking, anchoring the new consciousness through the activities of daily life, through their interactions with others, as well as through just being.
Frequency holders.
Yeah.
Just by being present.
Their state of consciousness itself contributes. This is reminiscent of Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The meek are interpreted here not as weak or timid, but as the egoless, those who have awakened to their essential true nature as consciousness and recognize that essence in all others, all life forms.
The egoless inherit the earth.
These are the ones who embody the awakened consciousness that is changing all aspects of life on our planet. The ultimate message is an empowering one. A new species is arising on the planet. It is arising now, and you are it.
Wow. We are the new species.
That's the potential presented. This isn't about some distant, abstract future utopia, but a transformation happening in the present moment, within each conscious individual. To awaken within the dream is our purpose now. It's a call to conscious presence and active participation in this profound evolutionary shift, right here, right now, wherever you are.
We've journeyed through the profound depths of human consciousness today, from recognizing our inherited dysfunction and the elusive pain body, to discovering the liberating power of presence and awakened doing. This deep dive has shown us that the most significant transformation isn't out there, in some future achievement or external circumstance, but within you, in how you relate to each and every moment. It's a radical call to shift from being human doings to human beings.
Yeah, it really brings it all back to the inner state, doesn't it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate purpose isn't about accumulating more or about becoming a different self in the future or even fixing every problem the world presents in the old way. It's about recognizing what you already are, your unchanging essence, right here, right now, beneath all the layers of thought and emotion.
Recognizing what we already are.
Which raises an important question for you to ponder long after this deep dive is over. If the voice in your head is not who you are and your physical and psychological forms are temporary, what truly remains as your unchanging eternal essence? And how might simply being that essence rather than constantly striving and doing from the ego change your entire experience of life and indeed the world around you?